Your investments also include Uber, Coinbase, but in the AI space, we think of Perplexity. We also think of PlayAI. And let's just talk about that because it's recently been purchased by Meta, which is on the hunt for deals. It's on the hunt to lead in superintelligence. We could get more of that, Steve?
Sure. Yeah. Good question. And thanks for having me on. I think what's happening right now is, in Meta's case, is that they're looking to completely overhaul their AI research team and also their research engineering team. And so, I think with data centers on the rise in terms of investment, you see some major hyperscalers, Amazon, Azure, and GCP, Google's cloud. You also see Oracle, who was just mentioned prior on the show, and then Meta. And Meta is an interesting case. Meta has one of the largest data center networks, is one of the largest buyers of GPUs, and is expected to be the largest buyer of GPUs moving forward over the next 18 months. They are trying to also build the largest AI frontier lab, and they're competing with OpenAI on that front. And what I think you're going to see, not only from them, but from every other private AI frontier lab like OpenAI and Anthropic, is it's a talent war. And the PlayAI purchase means several things. So number one, teams that have both a research scientist aspect to it, as well as a research engineering and product engineering capability, they're going to be really sought after in this market. And we're seeing a lot of that already among our portfolio and outside our portfolio. And so you're going to see continuous acquisition hunts. The second thing that's really interesting about this acquisition of PlayAI is that it's really the leading signal in what's happening in the space. Multimodal LLMs, the inclusion of video and audio and images and how LLMs work, like ChatGPT, and even applications like Perplexity, is super important. It's going to be ever increasingly more important, especially with generative media models, with generative images becoming more and more important. So that wave of generative media is going to be, in our estimation, going to be as large and as important in society and economy as LLMs. And so with these two trends happening, with voice AI in particular, in PlayAI's case, this is going to be a harbinger of a lot of things that are going to come down the line over the next 2 years in terms of multimodal as well as generative media and AI.
And I think of FAL in your portfolio companies. It's all about the ability to be making generative media. Now, before we get into the backlash as to whether this creates slop and what that ultimately means also for a business case for Meta going forward, Steve, I just want to go to another portfolio company that's been in the eye for M&A, and that's Perplexity. Like, would you ever see Perplexity being bought up by one of these big cloud players or even by an Apple?
Yeah, and I think, whenever there's a company that creates a sort of singular space and name for themselves, in an important area in technology, there's always M&A interest. We've seen some rumors about that in the news, so I'm not describing anything new that you don't know about there. But what you are seeing right now at this moment is a switchover, and the switchover is there are legacy companies with platforms and distribution and great products, but the AI wave itself has sort of left them flat-footed. And I think a company like Perplexity, it started from AI answers, right? Competing with the legacy and traditional search and bringing in AI search into the consumer's eye. And now what you're seeing with their new Comet browser is saying, how do we create a browser that not only brings in knowledge and answers, but also lets you take actions? So an agentic browser that allows you to create Spotify playlists, that allows you to deeply research your Robinhood portfolio as you're surfing it on the web. And really, if you think about it, browsers and websites, those are old school terms. All of your SaaS apps, Steve, all of your applications are coming from through a web browser. And so Perplexity is really an interesting agentic browser. Val,
so Steve,
yep.
Let me jump in there because that's
Sure.
what I found so interesting about your LinkedIn post when the Play deal was announced. Perplexity evolved and it grew organically, right? And in the history that you outlined in the LinkedIn post about PlayAI, you guys did the seed round a year ago. They grew so quickly, but ultimately they just got engulfed. They took their core tech and became part of something else. And as somebody that backs founders and kind of instructs them on what to do, that kind of seems like the future in this domain.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is the multimodality is really important here. What you're seeing is that, if you have voice AI, what you want is you want that to be part of a Lego block system with an LLM, a language model. And that's really the ultimate expression or the ultimate product there. And so that's what was happening with PlayAI. PlayAI was hosted on FAL. And FAL was providing the generative media inference for their speech models. And, merging that speech model technology with a speech-to-speech model in their case was something that was really exciting for Meta. And Meta's push is to create very personal AI. Mark Zuckerberg has talked about that publicly. And if you think about what they're building, PlayAI represented a really interesting aspect of saying, how do we create multimodal LLMs? How do we create voice AI in this personal AI vision that Meta has? And so it's a really unique purchase because most of the other acquisitions that Mark has executed have been hires, right? These 100 million plus hires. But PlayAI is the one company acquisition where he purchased not only a great team of researchers and engineers, but also of models. And so I think it's a really big push into multimodal LLM for Meta.